Hey everyone, Dennis here with a quick note. A few minutes into this episode, Sam and I, we went on a unintended tangent talking about screener access to the episodes before they air and how we talk about those on social media beforehand because we were addressing a couple of comments that we had received on Twitter. If you want to listen to that section, if you have any feedback for us, we always love to hear it. Or if you don't care about any of that stuff and you just want to get talking about salvation or bust, our non-spoiler review starts at about 24 minutes in, and our full spoiler discussion starts at about 31 minutes in. Hope you enjoy. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your co-host, Sam.
I am your co-host, Dennis.
And we are here this week to talk about Salvation or Bust, the latest episode of Quantum Leap 2022. The revival series is in full swing. Like we're 5 episodes deep now, and I feel like we got a good handle on things. We know we're getting 6 more episodes for a full 18 episode season 1. Without going into spoilers, like we're off to the races.
That we are.
Yeah.
That we are.
So let's dive into our normal kind of top of show stuff, and then we'll get into our non-spoiler review, and then dive into the spoilers because there's some ground to cover. Not necessarily there's not like a lot to talk about volume wise necessarily, but there's a lot to talk about.
But there is quite a bit to talk about. First off, how was your week, Sam?
It was good. It was long. That's kind of just how they've been for the past, few weeks. There's a lot of stuff going on. And, I didn't mention it or talk about it last week on the podcast, but last Monday was an interesting day. I spent a little time in the hospital, but I'm okay. Everything's fine. And the rest of the week just kind of followed on from that. No, things are good. Did the pumpkin patch today with the family, which it was, my son Jude, his first pumpkin patch. He'll be a year old in 9 days. Hattie loved it. She had a great time. This is her third go around for pumpkin patches. She's 4 now. So good times were had. It was good week. How about yours?
It was a pretty good week. We did the pumpkin patch yesterday.
Nice.
Harrison's 3rd or 4th by this point, Eleanor's 2nd. It was really fun. Great time. Awesome. Betsy was sick earlier this week. Not COVID. Just so happened she had her regular checkup scheduled with her primary care physician on Monday. So it was good timing. She wasn't feeling well, went in, not COVID, other stuff. She took a couple days off work. She rested, she recouped. When you work from home, it is very difficult to take a couple days off work. Especially when she is in high demand because she has a lot of responsibility. She wears a lot of hats at her job. So I am just glad that she was willing to take a couple days off work. So she did that. So that has been most of our week right now. So between that and the pumpkin patch and work and everything, not too exciting of a week. But before we jump into the episode, let's thank some folks. Yes. We got one new person this week, and just want to wish our old folks, our old folks. You're not old. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. You're not old. Don't cancel your patronship. Anyway, we want to thank our patrons and our donors who help keep the lights on here at Fate's Wide Wheel. We have Al's Place, Sleep Fan Site, Cosplay Dad, Joanne Bartlett, Dana Bias, Rich Bork, Kevin Butcher, a new Patreon. Deck goes by the handle of Dex Lower. Not Dex Slower, Dex Lower.
Yeah.
This individual follows on Twitter. I know they're a huge Star Trek Lower Decks fans. So I don't know where that comes from. I just put that together as I was reading it out loud.
Lower
Dermot Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganey, Jason Geis, Michelle Hoffman, Amy Holtkamp, Bess A. Corey, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmond, Adrian Saul, Karen Saxon, Mike Stouffer, Damon Sugamelli, Larry Trujillo, Jill Wilson, and of course, our anonymous donors. And if you would like to financially support the pod, it would mean the world to us. If you want to do it monthly, you can do it through patreon.com/fateswidewheel, or if you just do it one time, it is buy me a coffee, not buy us a coffee. Like I said last week, it is buymeacoffee.com/fateswidewheel. We got that information in the show notes.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I had a moment yesterday. I was driving out. As some of you may know, we're in the process of selling our condo in the city in Chicago and getting ready to buy a new place.
The
We're
original Project
currently,
Quantum Leap.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is strange, because that the where we recorded, the room where we recorded was painted this like deep dark purple, right? And
Mhm.
so of course that's all been painted over now, and now it's just this kind of gray, uh which seems to be the color you're supposed to paint everything, I guess, when you're trying to sell something. But I was driving out there to pick some things up, and on the way out there I was thinking about a few things that was spurred on by someone who had posted the video, and I wish I could remember who it was. I don't think they're like a follower of ours or anything like that, but a couple people that do follow us had liked the video of Mr. Rogers' acceptance for his Lifetime Achievement Emmy Award.
Mhm.
And as I was watching the video, I knew that it would be moving, right? But there's this part of me sometimes where it's like a challenge. It's kind of like, is this really gonna get me? Like, obviously I'm gonna be moved. It's Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers is amazing. And everything that I've ever watched of his that is supposedly moving usually moves me to tears, and this ended up being no exception. And one of the things that he does during the acceptance speech is he takes a pause for 10 seconds, and there's dead silence for 10 seconds, which, as we all know, that's not something that they like necessarily at the Emmys. And they
Mhm.
pan out to the crowd, and there are people, actors, are they just in tears as Mr. Rogers is talking about this, and he wanted to take those 10 seconds for people to think about someone in their lives, that meant something to them, that loved them, that gave them, the love and nurturing care that they needed to get to where they are today. And I, of course, thought immediately of my grandmother, who passed away a couple of years ago due to COVID. And I was driving, so I'm driving out, this is the next day. I'm driving out into the city, and traffic's terrible. So it's taking me about an hour to get there. And I'm not listening to any music. I don't have anything on. I'm just kind of in my thoughts. And I was experiencing some mild road rage, and not, not to the point where there was any harm coming to anyone, much less myself, but certainly some expletives. And I took a deep breath, and I thought about my grandmother. And in that moment, everything just went away. And I just smiled, and I felt good, and I felt grateful. And I felt like, just drive on by, man. It's all good. And the reason why I bring that up is because it caused this sort of spiral, or not spiral, but this domino effect of thinking about other things that I was grateful for. And that led me to thinking about how grateful I am for the opportunity to do this podcast. And it's so easy, especially right now with the episodes coming out every week, and this being like live, like it's happening. We're not talking about a show that's been off the air for 5 years,
Mhm.
or for 30 years. And it was a good reminder to me to not worry about, you know, clicks or exclusives or any of that sort of stuff, and just feeling very grateful to be able to talk about this, and feeling this sincere and extreme sense of gratitude to everyone that is supporting us, whether you're doing it financially or not, and how grateful I am for that. And hopefully that's something that I can continue to keep in mind, going forward, and just continue to be grateful, because this is definitely uncharted territory in so many ways, and
Mhm.
it's very, very different. And you know I don't want to lose sight of the fact that ultimately, like, we're just doing this because we want to share something with people that love and enjoy something as much, if not more, than we do. So I'm grateful for your listenership. I'm grateful for your engagement, and obviously grateful for anyone that takes the time to share any sort of financial donation to the podcast to help us keep things going, and hopefully get bigger and better and whatnot. And as always, if you're thinking about supporting the podcast, I would encourage you to donate to a local charity or favorite charity if you're not already doing so. And if after that there's still some loose change that you want to give to us, then by all means, yeah, help us to pay those bills, because it's not free to do this, which seems, it's like, I wish it was like an old ham radio set, in my garage or something. I could just do it for free, but alas, that's not the case. So thank you all so much. And hopefully again, that's something that we can just kind of continue to build upon and do with the community. And it's difficult sometimes because completely separate from Quantum Leap, which is wonderful. As some may know, I'm involved with another podcast and another kind of fandom, if you will, and was reminded of how toxic things can get in a very quick manner. And it just kind of blew my mind because it all started with a genuine question that was asked. And before I knew it, it was kind of like, wow, this got really kind of vitriolic very quick. And then I was able to kind of just change the channel, if you will, over to my Quantum Leap Twitter, the Fates Wide Wheel Twitter, and not feel that for the most part. I mean, obviously there's always going to be a little something out there, but it was really, really quite wonderful. And even the Reddit lately, the subreddit, which used to be kind of a dumpster fire, quite frankly, has been really nice lately too. Some really good observations, questions, etc. Lots of questions about the waiting room. But anyway, all that said, I just wanted to say how grateful I am that we get to do this and that people actually listen to us and want to support us. Because at our core, the main goal has always been to just kind of to do this creative endeavor and hope that we can kind of engage with and support and raise the level of discourse in a way when it comes to the fandom, so that it's not a toxic community, that it's not something that people are writing articles about. I mean, people are literally writing articles about like Star Trek and Star Wars and MCU fandoms and how awful they are. And as long as we can stay far, 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 far away from that, I will be grateful. And not that those fandoms don't have amazing pockets as well, wonderful, wonderful pockets as well. But I'm pretty jazzed that we're doing this and continue to do this.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, especially on Twitter, like the conversations that we have are just awesome and wonderful. Like the other night, like we got into a DM conversation, and I won't call them out by name in case they don't want to be called, but like just like a DM conversation with someone who is relatively a new listener to our podcast and friend and mutual on Twitter. I just love the conversations that we're having there. People that I'm meeting through TikTok, because I mostly run the TikTok account, and some new listeners that are filtering in through there. But most importantly, I'm learning to appreciate, like, I know there's some people who just like, they may follow us on Twitter, they don't listen to the podcast. They follow us on TikTok, they don't listen to the podcast. And the podcast now I see is like, it's our main component, but it's just one component of what we're doing. And if we're engaging with other fans in different ways. That's wonderful. That's awesome.
And like I said, it's such uncharted territory, and there's some things that I'm sure that we're gonna get wrong or we're gonna have questions about. And one of those things right now, quite frankly, that Dennis and I've been talking about, and he doesn't know that I'm gonna say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is our access to the screeners. Like that's something that we feel so fortunate that we're able to have that, so that we can record ahead of time, so that we can drop our episodes immediately following the premiere of the episode, because I think it gives us the ability to connect to more people. It's like that's what people do. They watch the show and then they're like, ooh, what else is out there? And if they can find us or any of the other podcasts for that matter, I think the sooner that we can kind of be there to help support that conversation about the episode, the better, because there's just so much out there. There's so many shows to watch, so many things to read, so many podcasts to listen to, etc. And so if we can kind of deliver that in a fashion that that people can connect with as soon as they're done, I think that that's helpful, not just for us, but again for the community. And one of the other things is that, like, being able to talk about that stuff ahead of time is fun for us as well. And I know that some people might not like it. It might rub people the wrong way. It might turn some people off to us. And I don't necessarily know what to do about that. And so certainly if there's anybody out there listening that has thoughts about that, feel free to let us know, what you're thinking and how you feel, because it seems as though the majority of people that we engage with have fun with it and enjoy it. And that it does what the intent is, which is to kind of just, amplify that excitement over the fact that we get a new episode of Quantum Leap to watch on Monday. We, because of the position that we're in, we happen to see it a few days early. And so it's fun to be able to say, like, oh guys, this is really good. And oh, we get a little bit of this. And obviously there's spoiler embargoes, so we can't just come right out and spoil anything, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And that's not to say that you have to do that. I mean, one of our supporters, you mentioned Damon earlier. If you go to our Facebook group, for instance, you can find Damon's videos and stuff in there that he's been producing recently. And oftentimes, he's producing stuff like a week later or something like that. And that in no way diminishes the quality of the content that he's putting out there. So, it's you don't have to necessarily be timely, but that's just kind of the position that we're in. And genuinely, we're just having fun. And I don't know what to make necessarily of any,
Sure.
naysayers, which to be completely fair, there's literally only been one. But it was a comment that at least made me kind of pause and say like, oh, all right, maybe we should think about this. And Dennis and I had a very brief conversation about it. And so I'm just kind of putting it out there. And if
Sure.
anybody else has any thoughts or feelings about it, feel free to share. And if not, then we'll move on and just kind of carry on doing what we're doing.
We're doing, yeah. And what I'll say in response to that is, I've seen a couple more comments than just the one that we discussed yesterday, but the common theme through the couple more that I've seen is that we're kind of lording our access to screeners over other people, and we're kind of like treating everybody else as like peons, or like, oh, you have to wait while we have the insider information. And if we ever come across that way, we definitely don't, because like Sam said, we just consider ourselves extremely lucky to be getting these screeners. It's like we've had conversations like a couple weeks ago. I'm like, I don't want to reach out too much to NBC or publicists for anything, for interviews. I don't want to bug them too much, because I don't want them to figure out that they gave us this little podcast screeners. I don't want to call too much attention to us.
Right.
Don't do anything that they take the screeners away. So that's where we're coming from there. And it's like we were live tweeting watching the screener the other night, and as Sam said, one person took issue with that. And the thing is, like, part of the reason why we are giving screeners is to put some non-spoiler teasery stuff
Right
out there into the world. And I think more traditionally you get that through non-spoiler reviews, like articles on websites, blogs, etc. Live tweeting it, like I said, we're still trying to figure out whether that is cool or not. We're figuring that out as we go. Like Sam said, feel free to give us feedback on that. But I think a lot of it right now is like kind of like that landscape is changing, and the fact that a little podcast like ours did get access to screeners. It's like, I think everybody, including like NBC and networks, like they're figuring out these new ways, like how do they engage fans in conversations. And with little podcasts like ours that aren't professional, that aren't, we don't have a lot of experience in doing this. We're all just figuring this out as we go. So if you're ever dissatisfied with anything that we do, just know that we come with good intentions. And like I said, we're definitely not trying to lord our access over anybody else.
No, most certainly not. And, I mean, there are other outlets out there and such that, have access to the same stuff and, we'll post little things here or there, or have even engaged with us, on occasion about certain
Sure.
things. And so it's just, it's strange. It's new. And it's something that I guess for me personally, I never thought about before. I knew that there were people out there that had access to those sorts of things with other shows, and it was just kind of like, oh, cool, they're there to help the show and talk about the show.
Sure.
And I think that one of the things that's become increasingly clear, to kind of steer us a little bit away from this, is that NBC seems to have a lot of faith in the show, and I think that it's an article that I read recently talked about kind of just the changing nature and landscape of broadcast television in general, and using Quantum Leap actually as an example of that. And one of the things that they said is like, look, these ratings might not necessarily look like blockbuster ratings, but NBC Universal might not necessarily be going for blockbuster ratings with this show. They're just going to put out this show and say, like, can we get an audience? How do we engage that audience? Is that audience paying attention to us, through streaming, through their DVRs, all that sort of stuff? Like, and I think that again, it's just the idea that there are shows out there before. I mean, NBC Universal, for instance, like they produced the Battlestar Galactica reboot, right? And that show, it never had like the highest ratings. Like it was highly rated on the Sci-Fi Channel, sure, but you compare it to other things, like not great ratings. But you know what it did do? It sold the hell out of DVDs, and it got a lot of buzz because it was quality television. And so I think that Quantum Leap. I'm not necessarily trying to compare Quantum Leap to Battlestar Galactica. I think as of yet, you look at Battlestar Galactica, and it probably was a better show or whatever. But that said, I do think that that they seem to be very invested in Quantum Leap, and I think that that's good for us. And I think that that goes to exactly what you were saying, Dennis, about wanting to make sure that they're connecting with outlets, podcasts, etc., that are out there not only reviewing the show, but in essence promoting the show. And part of what we do, not that we're shilling for the company, but we are kind of promoting the show because we want people to watch, because we want people to talk about it, because we want people to listen to us, because we're having fun,
Sure.
And so that kind of just goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And also this, like the last thought we had before we go into talking about the episode, I was just thinking about this before we start recording. Sometimes like we've been accused of being shills, particularly one person in particular. And internet and social media, it's a weird thing right now where you're kind of you're pushed into these things. Like you either have to completely love something or you completely have to hate something. And so
Right.
I find myself sometimes, and I've especially done this with the first episode of the series, is like, even though if I don't completely love it, like I am afraid to speak about it in too strongly of terms, because one, I know when I get really worked up about something, I can sound angrier and more critical of something than what I
Same
actually am.
here.
And two, it's kind of like trying to navigate, like, oh, if I say anything too negative, I'm going to be put into this, oh, I hate this camp.
Right.
And I don't want that right now. I feel a little bit more free now that I know that the series has been picked up. And I mean, not like coming out of my mouth, that sounds egotistical. Like I could actually influence like whether or not the show could get picked up, but I could breathe a little bit easier now. I feel like I can criticize the show a little bit more because I know that we are going to get a full season.
Yeah.
And I know that they're going to have more time to work out the kinks, which
I think part of
they already
that
said they should pretty well.
I think part of that is, it's like, we take what we do seriously enough, not like super seriously, but seriously enough that, we want, that we do feel a bit of responsibility with it. And that has nothing to do with NBC Universal or the actual production of the show. But it's the same as when we used to talk about the old show. It's like we took it seriously enough and felt enough responsibility that we weren't out there just doing a hatchet job on episodes that we didn't like we were always trying to talk about things in a very constructive way. I mean, even like, as much of a joke as we've made of it, like even with Machiko, like go back and listen to that Machiko episode. It's like there are moments that I enjoy in that episode, and I softened a little bit during our revisited episode, and I've been thinking about Portrait for Troyan recently, which is another episode that, in our initial run through, I was not super jazzed about. And now like I look forward to the opportunity to do that revisited episode and and talk about it in a different light maybe. But yeah, I think that that's just kind of the duty of anyone that takes on reviewing or critiquing something, is that you want to be honest, but at the same time, you're sharing something. And I think that one of the things that's kind of we've gotten off track with when it comes to criticism is that oftentimes people look at it as like a weather vane. Like, should I go outside today or should I stay inside today? And I don't think that when you really look at reviews and criticism in general, that it's supposed to be that. I don't think it's supposed to be you should watch this or not watch this. Instead, it should be like, this is what I thought of this, and I hope that what we can do and what we are doing is to help to create a dialogue, not to tell people that you have to be watching Quantum Leap, you're missing out, or skip this episode, it's awful. And I think that that's just kind of the general tenor that I hope that we can strike going forward and continuing, to kind of do that.
Yeah. So that's it. Should we jump in to our non-spoiler review?
Let's do it.
Sure. I'll go first this week because I think you've gone first the last couple of weeks, so I'll take that burden off of you. I feel like this episode suffered from following two really strong episodes, especially episode 3. And we talked about last week, like episode 3 and 4, about the same as far as like quality goes, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got the opportunity to watch this episode twice because I enjoyed it more upon the second viewing, but I do think this episode suffers from pacing issues. I think tonally there's some weird issues with the Leap story, and with the project story I had trouble getting investing with it and getting invested into it because one, it's either a standalone story or a story that we're probably not going to come back to for quite some time. And I feel like there were some missed opportunities with what it could have done. Otherwise, in hindsight, I find myself finding it very hard to care about the Leap story, or I'm sorry, the project story, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So yeah, on the whole, I'm not sure. I'm interested to see what I think about this episode coming back later in the season as it stands up against this other episodes, but I feel like it's kind of maybe an expected dip after strong third and fourth episodes.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think that the dip part, not necessarily the reasons for it, but I think for me, you really hit it with the tone of the Leap story. It did feel a little schizophrenic. Just maybe I shouldn't use that word in that light.
I almost said that in a conversation recently, and there's like, oh wait, there's a less problematic way to say that. So yeah,
there's probably a better way to say it.
Put a pin in that. Yes, we know, we are aware. There's probably a better way to say that. So
yeah,
yes.
It just feels a little all over the place at times. And the odd thing is that there are many wonderful moments, which we'll talk a little bit more in detail about during the spoiler review. But there are also some moments that I think are at odds with one another, which create this weird dissonance so that they don't necessarily connect, I think, to support and tell the whole story well. The weird thing about that is that I feel like overall, from point A to Z, when it comes to the Leap story, I'm satisfied with it though. Like I enjoyed it enough. I didn't, like if I'm being critical, if I'm putting that critic's eye on it, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can point to this, that, and the other. But if I'm just kind of sitting back and watching my TV, I'm kind of like, oh, it was fun. I really like this, and I think I felt that way about the episode as a whole. The interesting thing about the project stuff is what we saw at the project is exactly the type of stuff that you and I have been talking about literally for 5 years. Like you go back and listen to our earliest episodes and we talk about stuff like what we saw at the project in our earliest episodes and about how we wish we could have seen this or that or more of this or whatever. And now here we are, we're kind of getting it. And I don't necessarily agree wholesale with where you fell on it, but I do see how it feels a little disposable when it could have perhaps had maybe a bit more of an impact, or we could have seen that the connective tissue was strong enough that we were going to get, a follow-up on this, and not necessarily like, 10 or 12 episodes down the road, but like a few episodes from now, we're going to get more. There are, however, a couple of real high points throughout the course of the episode, and almost all of it has to do with the relationship between Ben and Addison.
Sure.
And I just love the fact that we had episodes in the original series, and no one will ever be able to, this is not about topping the relationship between Sam and Al in any respect. It's so different. It's so wildly different that I feel like any conversation trying to compare the two it's not even apples to oranges. It's apples to cyanide. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, actually, that's terrible because there's cyanide in apple seeds. But point is that what I'm trying to say here is that they're just completely different realms. Like I don't think that they bear comparison in the way that that we've seen some folks making the comparison between the relationships. And so I think that with the original series that there are times that we would kind of get like, periodic check-ins to the nature of Sam and Al's relationship, but we didn't necessarily see the evolution of the relationship. And part of that is because the relationship at the point when the show started was cemented, right? It was what it was. Whereas, when you have an engaged couple, like that's kind of a relationship in the midst of growing, right? Like it hasn't reached its destination yet in a way. And certainly, Sam and Al's had not either, but I think that there was a comfortability to it, right? And with this, we're really getting to see the growth of this relationship in interesting and fascinating ways, especially given the fact that Ben doesn't remember Addison, and then now he does. And I think that that they do some really, really lovely stuff in this episode with that. Another thing that I'll mention briefly before we get into spoilers is that I thought that it was really nice to get to know Jenn a little bit more, because I feel like she's the one character on the team that we know and have gotten the least with. And so this episode, we finally started to get a little bit more from her and see who she is, like, as a human being, as not just someone who's delivering information, which she's very good at, and Enrissa Lee is wonderful at, you know what I mean? But this was an episode where I actually got more to do, and I really enjoyed that. So overall, I think that, again, 3 and 4 thus far have been kind of the high points of the series. But man, when this episode was good, it was just as good, if not better, than anything in episode 4, as far as I'm concerned. Now, episode 3, I still think stands as kind of the high point of the series in a lot of ways. Yeah,
sure. Now, I will say, you said, like, you know, sitting back and having fun with it, like, less of a critical eye. The first time I watched the episode was a little bit more of a critical eye. The second time, I kind of tempered my expectations, and I was able to enjoy it more the second time. And to your point, like, any quabbles that I have, it is not with the cast or the engagement with the cast, especially with Ben and Addison. They're all great in the episode as usual. Magic, I felt, was written a little bit differently. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit more as we get into, like, the project side story. But that being said, let's jump into the spoilers, and we're going to do something weird, but we figured, like, this is very appropriate for this episode. We are going to start with the last scene, and then we are going to jump back to the beginning. It'll become evident why we do that.
Yeah.
So that being said, at this point, I think we don't usually do this, but for this particular case, we are going to drop in the audio of what we see in the last few minutes of this episode, or the last few seconds of this episode.
You made a serious miscalculation calling her Ben.
Did he just call you Ben?
How did you know my name? I know everything about you, Dr. Ben Song, from the year 2022. I know what you're doing, but if you value your life, you need to stop following me. Do you understand?
So yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I tweeted holy shit, and I stand by that. I think that there were a lot of folks, ourselves included, that suspected that something like this was coming. We did not think it was coming this soon, however. I honestly did not. I thought this was something that we were going to get, like, maybe 3-4 more episodes down the line.
Sure.
Something very, 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 very funny about that is that we heard it through places that was kind of the discussion that was taking place behind the scenes, is that when would this happen? When would this not happen? And that the decision was made from the very top, if you will, as it comes to, you know, the showrunner and executive producer, that this was the time to do it. And there's a reason why he's the showrunner, because it's absolutely the right time to do it.
Yeah. Like it more and more. And I said this earlier, I love Stephen Lillian and Brian Rembrandt from the little bit that I know them, but I kind of breathed a little bit easier when I saw that Martin Garrow was coming in to run the show. So yeah, I'm excited where this is going. I wasn't expecting it this soon. I'm wondering if we're diving into it a little bit too early, but hey, in Garrow we trust. There'll be a new t-shirt. Look at our merch store. Anyway, now the reason why we wanted to do this scene first is because we don't know the other time traveler's name, obviously, but he's played by actor Walter Perez. So I think for simplicity, we'll just call him Walter in this in this episode. Walter is in this episode from the beginning, and I know you only got a chance to watch it once. Part of the reason why I wanted to watch it twice is I knew I saw him at least once. I wanted to go back and see how many times I could spot him throughout the episode. He is one of the first people that Ben engages with outside of Valentina. I don't know if you remember, but after he steps out, we get the oh shit moment, like he's in the Old West. We get McDonough right up and he starts talking. And I don't know if you remember this, but Ben walks up beside someone. He said, Who's this guy? And the guy points at the wanted poster. It was Walter.
That's him. Yeah.
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 So there's so many questions, and we were messaging with Matt Dale of the Quantum Leap podcast. It's like, is he a leaper? Is he a time traveler? Are we seeing him as the leapee? Are we seeing him as what he actually looks like? How does he see Ben? So many questions. We obviously don't know, but yeah.
It's interesting because I think that on one hand, it makes sense that we're seeing the actual leaper, that Walter Perez is the actual actor that will play this role, permanently. However, I mean, I guess it is kind of worth just thinking about, speculating on the fact that if that's not the case, it'll be very interesting kind of going forward. And will it be a case like, will Ben always recognize him? That's the thing that I think is kind of the key here. And will Addison, because if we as the audience can always see that it's him, but Ben can't, that could create some really interesting stuff down the road. Now, obviously, there's an adversarial relationship set up right away because he says, I'll kill you. He says, like, if you keep following me, I'll kill you, which is also interesting because
if you value your life.
Right?
Yes.
Because the thing is like, it's really interesting to me in that it seems as though Walter, in quotation marks, is thinking that Ben has control over what he's doing. And I think that he does, in so much as he put this code in, but Ben has no idea that that's the case. So if the code is actually the thing that's getting Ben from leap to leap to leap to leap, and he's in essence following this other leaper around, that's all well and good, but Ben has no clue that that's what he's doing. So I think that that's interesting in and of itself, because again, it just provides, I think, a lot of dramatic tension there between what Ben is aware of and what he's not aware of, and what the other leaper might think that Ben is aware of, but he's not.
Sure.
It's interesting to kind of think for the fact that it doesn't seem like this guy's brain is Swiss cheesed.
No.
So now here's a question I want to ask you.
Sure.
And we're about to go really, really deep on some speculative stuff that we may never get an answer on. We know, and it's out there now, and it's, this isn't even a spoiler anymore. We not only did Scott Bakula say it, but we also know, because the script itself is it's out in the wild. Anybody can pretty much go find it.
Yeah.
At the end of the original pilot episode, there's a figure standing next to Janice, and we see them talking to Janice, and it's just like some dude, right? And then of course the camera kind of switches POV, and we realize all of a sudden it's Sam that is talking to her. Do you think that there was ever the intent that the leaper that Ben was following through time was supposed to be Sam?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah. Not that there would have been this adversarial relationship, not that this scene would have happened, because we know we can say, based off information that we have, that this episode was something that was kind of like, this was sort of added in. This was not the original episode 5 that was planned. This was something that was done after the fact. Apparently the original episode 5 was going to be like a courtroom drama episode, and not, an Old West episode. So like, this came late to the party, if you will. Almost kind of like the premiere episode. Both of these episodes were episodes that were kind of crafted by the new team. And not that Stephen Lillian and Brian Winbrandt aren't involved. Their names are still, listed as EPs. But these are episodes that they did not necessarily come in and say, this is what we're doing, type of thing. So I don't know. I think that that's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about in terms of the story that we get, and imagining that kind of alternate reality where, what if this leaper was Sam and not Walter?
Sure. And to address the broader question, because we see this question out in the wild, like, is Ben going after Sam? And here's what I think creatively is going on. I think that's one option. I think the writing team has probably given themselves 3 or 4 different outs of what Ben's end goal could be.
Sure, totally.
And possibly, maybe one, if they can hook Scott Bakula in by the end of the season, maybe his goal is getting to Sam by the end of the season. If not, they have another venue. It's a weird analogy. It's not exactly a 1-to-1, but the different possibilities of who the mother might be at the end of How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, sure.
You know, because I know the writers, like, they had some outs in case they didn't get beyond a first season.
Right.
So I think the writers probably have 3 or 4 different outs, and maybe one of them is Scott Bakula, if they can get him to be a part of the show by the end of the season. We don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that our other leaper is actually a bad guy? Is it an evil leaper?
I don't think so.
Yeah, neither do I.
And here's why. Maybe it's like saying we do before we actually get into like the meat of the actual episode itself. When I was watching it the second time, I was looking for his reactions to things.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like in that first scene, he was just as distressed as anybody else as what was going on.
Sure.
As far as McDonough shooting the sheriff.
Right.
Things like that. So I don't, he's, whatever his goal is, I think he probably may have had probably not a similar goal, because I figured he would have gotten involved at some point. I don't know. If not a similar goal, like, I don't think his goal in Salvation was to make sure that the town sank and that the town was defeated. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh yeah.
So for that
I completely
reason,
agree.
So for that reason, I don't think he's outright evil. And I don't think he's necessarily working with in opposition to Ben on the sleep, or else he would have been doing things to help McDonough.
Right.
Whereas whenever we see him later on in the episode, he's in close proximity to Ben, but he's not interfering with Ben.
Right. Right. This is not an Aaliyah situation, where she's trying to wreck things. I completely agree. Do you think that that he's working with Janice in any way?
No, I don't.
Yeah, neither do I.
I think Ben and Janice have their thing. And I think this is a totally different thing.
So you don't think Janice is aware of this other leaper?
I don't think so.
I think she might be.
I
think she might be aware, but I don't think that they're working together. Or maybe they were working together, or maybe they will be working together.
Oh yeah.
Because, time travel.
Because
that's the other thing. The other big question is like, when does he come from? When did he start traveling through time?
There's a lot you could read into, like Dr. Ben's song of the year 2022.
Right. Well, because, okay, so here's the thing. I think it can go either way, right? Like, what if this guy's from like 1999? What if he's from 1998? What if he snuck into Project Quantum Leap? Or what if he worked at Project Quantum Leap? Or what, you know what I mean? What if he was an unauthorized leap? Or what if he's from 2002, 2003 or something? You know what I mean? Like, what if he because I think we can probably safely assume that the project kept going for a couple of years at least after Sam disappeared, right? After Mirror Image. Like, I don't think that they just closed up shop right away. So what if he was like an unauthorized leap that there's no real information out there about or whatever? Or the flip side of that, of course, is what if he's coming from like the year 2040, so I don't know. It's really, really cool. There's so much stuff that they can do with it now. And I think that, the wonderful thing that this episode proved, and what you were just saying too about the fact that he doesn't interfere, is that this is not a case of, good guy, bad guy, white hat, black hat, to play into the Western tropes here. This is more a case of like, Ben can still have his leaps. He can still do what he's doing. They can still what they're doing at the project. And this storyline can almost run parallel while intersecting, when necessary. And I kind of dig that. I like the fact that like maybe we don't see this guy for a few more episodes again, right? And I don't think that's the case. I think we'll probably see him around Halloween, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be later than that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just exciting, and it's wonderful, and it's the thing that they have been able to do successfully. I feel like for a few episodes now, where they're able to give us a little something that feeds into kind of this ongoing arc. And again, it reminds me of like kind of that style of storytelling of like Lost and Alias, where it's like every episode there was that new bit of information that you were getting. Now, of course, the thing with both of those shows is like, they had no idea where they were going for the most part, but I feel like these guys do. you know? Yeah, so it's just, it's fertile, to say the very least, for storytelling.
Yeah. And like we said, to reiterate, Martin Garrow has said in that Collider interview, this is a 1-season story arc, because that's the way he kind of believes in like storytelling for like TV shows. So this will all be wrapped up, and then next season, fingers crossed, it'll be a different mystery.
Right. Yeah, but, you know, and I almost wonder too if it'll be the type of deal where you know, maybe things will wrap up a little bit, maybe not wholly, but start to wrap up before the end of the season, and they can start sowing the seeds for next season before this season even wraps up all the way.
Sure.
Like, it's not going to just be like, here's season 1, it's this finished story, and you know, and now here's season 2, it's a completely different story. Like, there's still going to be a lot of elements that tie in and lead you to the next point, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
that being said, should we get into the actual?
Let's do it.
Actual story. Excellent. So Ben leaps in. We get a lot of information right at the beginning from Valentina. We get a mirror shot. We get the stakes, and then we get Valentina storming out and Ben following her out and getting the oh shit moment. We get, you know, we're clearly on the backstage, but clearly like that landscape in the back was CGI. I don't know if you saw this week on Twitter, but Carol Davis shared how the CGI team, how they recreated Philadelphia and LA with CGI as much as they could. So I'm sure that they, you know, obviously that landscape is CGI there. And yeah, we quickly get into it, him walking down the street, McDonough and the gang right up. They kind of present the stakes of being with I put my notes on paper this week, so you can't see it, but you can see me looking up with the Southwest Pacific Railroad Company. Basically, they're getting bought out. They're getting walnut groved, to use an old reference, but with more nefarious individuals. And like we said before, one of the first people that Ben interacts with, he asks, "Hey, who's this guy?" And the person points off at the window poster. There's Walter.
Yeah.
There he is. So like him and Ben are almost standing right next to each other that entire first scene.
Right. Yeah, and I think the setup for all of this, you know, and obviously the leap out from the previous episode gave us, you know, the moments between Valentina and Ben and the mirror shot, but to see him like walk out and be there, you know, in this old West town, and to immediately kind of, you know, step in it, if you will. It's just all the setup we need, and the stakes, of course, are super high because what does McDonough do? But he shoots and kills the sheriff, like right off the bat.
Sure.
But it's weird because I say the stakes are really high. However, it's not necessarily true. This is one of those uneven moments that I was talking about, like tonally, because there's kind of like, you know, like, okay, well, you know, he's dead. Let's move on to, you know, give us more exposition, you know.
and that's the thing, like totally what I had the issue with is that after McDonough, it wasn't clear whether or not the sheriff is dead or not. Probably, but it wasn't absolutely clear. We don't see the sheriff for the rest of the episode, but whatever. But the thing is, it's like after that, I don't know why McDonough just doesn't up and shoot other people at various points throughout this episode. Like when Valentina jumps up, why doesn't he shoot her? When he introduces Abuelo Diego, why doesn't he shoot him? Especially given what he says later in the episode, like he knows that Diego is the hope of the town, and if he kills him, he kills all the hope. Why doesn't he just shoot Diego in this very first scene?
Right.
And that's why I had issues with him shooting the sheriff right off the bat, because like you said, it sets up these like, oh, these are the high stakes, but then we never exactly match those stakes for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I was until the climax. I think we do once we get to the kind of the climax.
Sure.
But the thing about the episode, though, that I think is so successful, and we get this kind of right off the bat, it's the people. And that's not to say that we get to know all of these people or whatever, but you get a strong sense that the people in this town have nowhere else to go. And that's something, a theme that kind of carries throughout the episode when we do meet some of these characters and we do get to spend a little more time with them. But yeah, it's I think it's an interesting choice because it's one of those things that, look, there's some cliched moments during this, and I think that you kind of get a few freebies because you're in the old west, and you're and some of the dialogue feels very cliched.
There will be blood.
Pick up sticks or there will be blood. Yeah, or
Yeah.
pick up sticks and get out of Dodge or there will be blood. It's like, holy shit, that's a lot of cliche in one line.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But but in a way you kind of expect that, and in a way you forgive it a little easier, and it's the same thing with it's like, oh, the big bad black hat wearing guy shoots and kills somebody right off the bat, and again, you don't really know that he's dead right off with the bat or whatever, but so yeah, it's an interesting choice, and it's one that I don't know is entirely successful. Now luckily it's in the same manner that it gets swept aside and we're kind of not sure if we should care about it or how big of a threat McDonough really is, we move on immediately into stuff that starts to kind of feel a little bit more honest and a little bit more important to the to the overall texture of the storytelling, because we start to meet some of the citizens. Addison comes in, of course. We have these, and the funny thing is, it's like some of these moments between Ben and Addison are kind of awkward, and I love that they're a little awkward. Like Ben will say something, he'll be a little eager, and he'll say something, and then Addison will kind of have this moment where she's just sort of like, okay, we need to think about this right now, and it's just it's the interplay between them is really interesting to me, and I'm really enjoying it throughout the course of the episode. And then of course it's all like the core of it, of course, is the genuine bond and love that these two human beings share, and by the time we get to the end of the episode, that's very apparent. Anyway, where should we go from here?
Where should we go? I mean, first off, very briefly touch on the first scene in 2022 between Magic and Addison. We just know that the restrictions of not restricting or not trying to avoid jogging Ben's memory, that is no longer a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Magic, no, now that he remembers you, and now that Janice is a factor, we need as much information from Ben as possible. So anything you can do to get that is great. What I find refreshing, and maybe I don't watch enough TV, but whenever I watch these kind of shows with kind of these procedural Blacklist, CSI kind of things, I always expect the characters to be butting heads in direct opposition to each other.
Right.
And just how refreshing it is to have characters they're not exactly on the same page, but ultimately they respect each other and they're finding a common ground.
Yeah,
that's just something I find generally refreshing overall. Oh, and this is where she gets the it's in this meeting with Magic, she gets the update from Ian that they found Ben in 1879. Do you catch that Easter egg?
No.
Why 1879 is an Easter egg?
No.
Because in the Halloween episode in B-Man, when Sam first leaps in, he's reading a book, Witchcraft in America by Edward whatever 1879, and very briefly at the beginning of B-Man, that's where Sam thinks he is.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
One of the things too that I love about this scene is Magic's line of dialogue about how it's a fluid situation. I think it's a good insight into his character. This is not somebody who's inflexible. This is not somebody who's going to be so rigid. And I think that I did not think that he would be a rigid, authoritarian character from the get-go. And clearly, when they have the get together over at Addison's and Ben's house, for instance, this is not somebody who's trying to keep his distance and whatnot. But it's just nice to know, that this is a character that is not one-dimensional by any stretch. And I think just that single piece of dialogue is a wonderful window into the way that he plans on running the project now that things have changed. And it also is nice because it does take us a little bit away from that procedural stuff, just like you were talking about. This doesn't feel like the stuff that happens at the project this week. There's a chunk of it that does, but there's a lot of it that does not feel procedural, if you will, which is nice, because some of the stuff, some of the investigative stuff early on, it's like, you kind of could have just thrown CSI, on the label, and you would have been like, oh yeah, this is something that they would do on that show. Sure. And this didn't feel like that, which was nice. Not that I minded any of that sort of stuff. I enjoyed seeing Magic and Jen go and trying to track down Janice and talking to Beth and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting too that Addison is still kind of holding on to the fact like this shouldn't be possible that Ben's in 1879, in spite of the fact that at this point he's already traveled back before he was born, outside of his lifetime. But I guess that maybe there's just that idea that it's just kind of like maybe unbeknownst to us off screen, this is total headcanon fan wank stuff. They were holding on to the theory that he could travel within Sam's lifetime as well, as we had sort of speculated about before the series even aired. Or something, I don't know, but
that's the thing. Yeah. I wish for old school fans they would have given more than just Addison's one line of surprise. Like I wish they would have had like a little more with like Ian being surprised too.
Right. Well, I mean, Ian was surprised when Ben was back in 1977.
I know, but like even more like 77 is one thing. A few years beyond your lifetime is one thing. Old West, holy shit.
Right. Well, because she wasn't there when Ian had that line of dialogue about how he was going to travel way back. So I don't know. We'll have to kind of wait and see.
Oh, that's right. I mean, yeah, because if Ian knows like this trajectory thing that whatever. Yeah, never mind. I take all of that back. I'm sorry, Quantum Leap writers. You know what you're doing, and I'm just a tired dad doing a podcast. Anyway, but back to what you were saying, the moments between Ben and Addison, they are delightfully awkward. Like Ben says a couple of awkward things in this first scene with them that like, and you know what it is. It's like when you're early in a relationship and you're really overeager. Yes. Sometimes you sometimes things just spill out of your mouth that are just really super cheesy, and then right after,
right,
you want to pull it back like, oh god, am I gonna scare her off because I sounded too eager right there.
Right. And I think that it illustrates a wonderful element of Ben's character at this point, which is that like even more than before, like Addison, it's like that's the thing for him, that's his anchor, right? And before it was just like, okay, you're the person telling me what to do, and you're from where I'm from, and I need you, and you make me feel safe, like he says in the premiere episode, best line of the premiere episode as far as I'm concerned. Now though, it's it's kicked up a notch. It's like, you're the woman I love, and that's the other thing too, is it's like the last thing he said to her pretty much was, you're the woman I love and I got to get back to you. And he leaps, and now here they are meeting one another again, and it's funny because Ben is clearly in this awful situation where he just saw somebody get shot and he's just all kind of like, oh, you're here, it's so good to see you and everything. And she's the one that has to kind of pump the brakes and be like, yes, I love you too. Not literally, she doesn't literally say that, but let's figure out why you're here and what you got to do.
It's also worth noting, because I find myself having to constantly make this shift, being a fan of the old series, obviously, is that there was always this perception of like a passing of time in between leaps. Like no matter how soon Al showed up after whatever, but they make more than one reference to the fact like this has been kind of nonstop for Ben. Like he notes in a scene later on, like he has not slept. And I just want to kind of get into the mechanics of like, okay, your mind is leaping and you haven't slept, but the people you have leaped into have slept. What does that do for, like, is there a certain level of his psyche, like he is operating on no sleep, even if the leapies have had sleep? Like, how does that work? But to the point of this scene, like from both Ben and Addison's perspective, like they kind of just spoke. Like it doesn't seem like maybe the end of the last sleep was just a few hours ago for Addison, maybe,
right?
But for Ben, it was instantaneous, it seems like.
Yeah, that is interesting. And well, I always got the feeling that, and I know the books did something a little different with this when they kind of explained the process of what Sam felt in between leaps, that it was kind of like this weird sort of like he was aware, but he wasn't really aware, like every once in a while he could feel that he, was like basically pure energy or whatever. But like, I still think that, that there's a passage of time for Ben. He's just completely unaware of it. He doesn't realize that it might have taken him, 3 days to get from 1981 to 1879 or whatever. I don't know though. I mean, maybe we'll get more of a concrete answer to that down the road. I think that that's one thing that's important, kind of, for us to remember. And I use the universal us to include the whole fandom, is that, like, there's a lot of questions out there, right? And frankly, we're not going to get all of those answers to right away, and we're certainly not going to get all of those answers spoon fed to us. That there's some stuff that might be left unsaid, that there's some stuff that we might have to infer. But again, like, give them time, because they've got it now. They've got another 13 episodes to play with, to give us more information and tell us more about what's to come. But yeah, it's clear that Ben is, like you said, Ben's tired, right? He's starting to kind of like have that effect where it's like, I'm doing this thing, and at this point, he hasn't had many opportunities to get a night's rest. Usually these
None.
leaps are in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
And somebody up there likes Ben. I think it's implied that he's slept. Because that takes place over a couple days. But yeah, usually these leaps are like, and obviously in this episode he likely gets some rest at some point, because it's not all in one day. But yeah. So anyway, kind of moving on from that, there's some there's some nice stuff. We get off right off the bat. We get some great information about who he's leapt into. He's Diego de la Cruz, a Mexican-American gunslinger, retired to San Francisco after his wife died, and that his son Marco was the mayor of Salvation, and that his granddaughter Valentina, who of course he's already met, has brought him here to kind of save the day. Mm-hmm. The cool thing about this, and it ties in nicely with the way that Ben acts throughout the entire episode, is that you get the idea that, Diego put his guns down, right? Like, he sent his guns to Marco. And so this kind of peaceful take that Ben has might not be at odds with the historical Diego de la Cruz. It's just that in the original history, it seems like Diego, hightailed it out of town, as opposed to sticking around to try to find a different resolution. He was just sort of like, I don't do this anymore, I'm leaving. Yeah. As opposed to
takes Valentina with him.
Yeah. As opposed to Ben, kind of being like, all right, let's figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't involve, me having to kill someone or someone else getting killed.
Sure.
And he has this amazing line. And again, Ben is just, I am just so in love with Ben more and more and more and more. And, that is in part, of course, due to Raymond Lee, but it's also, just to the way the character is written. He has this line later on: to jump back in time to kill someone feels deeply cosmically wrong, and I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. I just love that line.
I think Walter is going back in time to kill someone. I do. Right. When I watched it the second time, I was like, oh, they're making such a big deal about this line. Like, I have to wonder if on the other side of like whatever this maybe not evil project, but this project working in opposition, I think Walter is going back to kill someone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
All right. I'm going to throw something really crazy out here. You ready for this?
Sure.
The whole reason that Ben leaps, the speculation has been, what everyone's saying, it has something to do with Addison. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Walter, in quotes, is leaping to kill Addison. And the reason why is because Addison gets kind of driven crazy by the fact that they can never get Ben back either, just like Al could never get Sam back. Mm-hmm. Addison does something catastrophically horrible in the future, right? And that is causing Walter to go back in time to a point where he can get to her and make sure that she and Ben never cross paths, because the entire impetus for Ben leaping in the first place, which led Addison down this path of destruction, was Addison. And so if he eliminates Addison, Ben never falls in love with her. Maybe Ben never even leaps ever, period. And, end of story. That's that. Wild speculation, could be completely wrong. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's legs to a story like that, if that's the case. Yeah. Even if it doesn't have anything to do with that, I just love the texture that it gives to Ben's character. And there's so many wonderful Ben moments throughout the episode. Again, Ben's agency is something that I just love. Like, this is, he's not a passive character. You know, he's always trying to figure something out. He's always willing to step up. He is a pacifist, but he's always willing to step up, which is also one of, I'm glad you mentioned that point, because there's some wonderful interplay between him and Addison, whereas Addison is kind of just sort of like, look, you know, one of the things that this is something that you and I have always been at odds about, you know, because I know from my military background that there are times when, yes, you have to, like, you know, pick up a gun and do something about it. Right.
Yeah.
Which is,
and the thing is, like, I had to adjust my expectations of this episode, because the first time I watched the episode and I saw that scene, I couldn't help but think of Honeymoon Express. And I thought, oh, is this going to be the episode where Ben has to learn how to kill someone? Because, like Addison said, like, sometimes you have to meet force with force.
You know what? Here's something I'll say about that. Another show, we've talked about this show a little bit in the past, just in reference to the fact that there are similarities between it and Quantum Leap, but The Pretender was a show that I really enjoyed and followed along with. And the lovely thing about The Pretender is that for the first few seasons, Jared, the main character, you know, he had kind of a no violence, no kill policy. Like, everything was sort of done, you know, in more peaceful terms, you know, very much MacGyver type stuff, right? You know, he used his wits. And there was maybe a little bit of violence here or there, but oftentimes, you know, Jared was not the one that was committing the acts of violence, right? As the show was struggling a little bit, I think maybe, you know, they were like, let's spice it up. Let's do something new. Like, they had, you know, Jared take a life or whatever. But again, it was like 3 or 4 seasons into the show. I think it was like either late 3rd season, early 4th season, which is the last season. And in a way, like what you just said, it makes perfect sense to me. It's like, you know, why spend that this early, quite frankly, if you don't have to? And B, why not make a statement that maybe we never have to do that at all? Like, maybe Ben never, ever, ever has to kill anyone ever to be successful.
That would be great. Because the thing is, like, as I was saying this out loud, like, people keep getting hung up. Like, what happens the first time he has to get romantically involved with someone? And I will say, Sam never had to get romantically involved with someone.
Sure, right.
Ben never has to get romantically involved with someone. And to your point, yeah, maybe he never has to kill someone.
And I think that this episode is a testament to that fact, right? Like, this episode, in a way, makes the statement that, like, there's always another way.
Yeah.
Build a better mousetrap, you know?
Yeah. Which may not be true in real life, but it's something to aspire to.
Absolutely. Anyway, and that's the whole point, right?
While we're spending time early on here, early in the episode, in Ben and Addison's first scene, it should be noted we get the first smacking of the hand link.
Yes.
Which will be interesting to see, because is she smacking the hand link because we're going to get a new hand link next week?
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because of course one of the things that they do that's very smart here is the leap out is a fade to black, basically.
Yeah.
Now, all the information we have, everything seems to point to, in fact, I think at this point we can pretty much just go ahead and confirm that next week will be the earthquake episode.
Unless it throws a curveball, yeah.
Right, unless they throw us a curveball.
No pun intended, World Series earthquake. Anyway.
Right, nice. Well done. Well done.
Hey,
was that intentional or
not intentional, but I'm a dad. The puns are just built in. Yeah.
So I think that they've set themselves up nicely for that, and there are a couple of things that happen throughout the course of this episode that I think give us the opportunity to have things be a little shaky. Again, no pun intended, for next week if it is the earthquake episode. It's also interesting to note that Diego, of course, is from San Francisco, which is, you know, where Ben will potentially end up next.
And speaking of what I love about it, that I love the bar scene. Learning from, is Frankie the bartender? Yeah, Frankie the bartender.
Oh man,
and
she's
learning
great.
more about the story. Even like it's cliche, but as someone who grew up watching westerns, I love it. Like the joke about the whiskey versus the water.
Yes,
I really enjoyed that. But I love when Ben throws out, like, there's always, you know, where I come from, there's always another option. And Valentina's like, oh, what would they do in San Francisco? And he's like, actually,
right,
throw money at the problem. I really like that.
Yeah. I just want to say Yanni King Monshine, I hope I said her name correctly, that's the name of the woman who plays Frankie the Madam. I love her throughout the course of the episode. Even her very first appearance, when she tells Joe, kind of the drunk who's just sort of like, there's nothing in this town anyway, you know, she's like, Joe, go inside, have another drink. Like, it's just, again, that little moments like that helped this town to feel alive, and I really enjoyed that, and it heightened my enjoyment of the episode overall. I'd be interested. I'm interested to here's something that we don't do often enough, or maybe we do. I don't know. But here's a plug for one of the other podcasts out there. Alison Pregler had tweeted out that she really enjoyed the episode. This was her favorite episode so far. So I'm interested to know what she thought and why she thought that. Just because like there are a lot of these little moments that I really enjoyed, and so I'm curious if that was one of the things that she enjoyed, and how the rest of the group over at Quantum Leap Podcast will feel about that as well. Because it was just I don't know, it was just little stuff like that throughout the course of the episode that helped to heighten my enjoyment of the episode and maybe forgive some of the stuff that you might have had a difference of opinion with. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. But anyway, so Ben leaves the bar. He's going to go find a way to throw money at the problem. And then let's jump back to 2022, because now we have the whole introduction. I wrote it down phonetically. The thing is, for whatever reason, usually by this point, we have the promo photos, and we have like the names of all the actors and everything that NBC puts up. For whatever reason, they have not put out promo photos at all for this week. So I just wrote her down as Congresswoman throughout.
It seems to me that I'll get to your question in a second, but it does seem to me that not only was this episode maybe put in late into the rotation, but based off of information that we've gotten, it feels like this episode might have been worked with, if you will, up until like the last minute. So maybe that's why production photos didn't come out right away, because they didn't necessarily know what scenes were going to be retained and what scenes weren't going to be retained.
Sure.
It seems like they were tinkering with things and trying to kind of like get the overall look and feel of the episode right as best as they could, that they had, that some of what they had to work with wasn't necessarily what they wanted, etc. So I think that maybe that's one of the reasons why. Don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The name that I got, and again, could be wrong, because here's the other thing too. Not only do we not get those production photos, but there's no closed captioning on the screeners.
Yeah.
So you don't even have that advantage. Was Kabiba Adani, I believe was her name. Yeah, so it's interesting here because there's been a lot of speculation, including our own speculation, over who this nosy senator would be. And I think a lot of us thought that it would be a legacy character. I knew right off the bat that it was not going to be Diane McBride. So everyone out there who kept thinking that it was going to be Diane, she would have been in her 90s. And again, like I said last week, even though that's no reason for somebody to not be an elected official in this country, which maybe it should be, but hey, I just didn't think that they were going to try to do something like that.
Sure.
I thought that potentially it could be Tom Beckett, because of course Tom Beckett was indeed a congressman in Mirror's Edge, I believe, and maybe a couple of the other novels as well. And I thought, maybe they're going to do a playoff of that or whatever. Obviously, they didn't. They did not go with a legacy character at all. This is an entirely new character, played by Farah Marani. I thought she was fine. In fact, to be completely honest with you, I enjoyed her work more than I enjoyed the resolution that they came up with to kind of keep her from spoiling the project.
Sure. Can we just go ahead and address this entire storyline now?
Let's do it.
Just get back. Okay. I feel like this was a missed opportunity. Like if every individual meeting that she had was like the one that she had with Jenn, where we got a chance to learn a little bit more about Addison, a little bit to learn a little bit more about Ian. While I did appreciate on one level the yes ma'am, yes ma'am, no ma'am. While I did appreciate that, I don't, especially like with the resolution, I don't see what the point of this subplot was, because especially at the end, like wherever the nuclear option was, I got excited the first time watching it, and I texted you this Friday night. I thought it was going to be something like very scandalous, sex scandal. I think.
Oh, sure.
I think that's the
like a callback to the
I think that's the direction they wanted us to go down, and I was thinking of how
Tina and Weitzman.
Al sets up Tina and Weitzman in Star-Crossed with the specific thing to blackmail him, and I thought that maybe we're going to get a touch of that, because she almost just on the edge of like mustache twirling villain energy to her. Like you almost like want to see her get served something like a sex scandal or something where she's more in trouble, like needs to back off.
Yeah,
you know, misreading that.
Okay, so I just want to address a couple of things real quick. One, while Jenn was clearly the character that we got the most from in the interactions with Congresswoman Adani, I do think that we did get some interesting stuff about Addison, stuff that was not necessarily things that we didn't know before, although I don't think we'd ever gotten her rank before. She was addressed as captain. So we know that Addison is a captain in the military. The other thing that I thought was interesting is the way that Adani just literally said, "You were the first woman ever selected to travel through time," which is also interesting to me because I don't know that Sam Beckett was ever selected to travel through time, which also makes me wonder, was someone else, aka our other leaper, selected to travel through time at some point? So I thought that was kind of an interesting use of that word, because to me, I don't think you could ever go up and say, like, Al could have never sat in front of that committee and say, "You selected Sam Beckett to be the first man to travel through time." Like, I just don't think that that's the case. Like, I don't think anybody can make an argument that Sam Beckett was selected to travel through time. So the line made me wonder, and I could be reading too much into it, made me wonder, is there something more at play behind that?
Sure.
You know, it's weird because the stuff with Jenn I thought was wonderful. We got to know more about Jenn. She was a hacker. She used to be in prison. She's a felon. She's got a record. You know, Magic for some reason wanted her, specifically her, for this. I just think that we're starting to get the sense of that there is more motivation behind all of these characters, and than what we're given. And I love that. And I think that hopefully it will come back into play later. Now, the flip side of that is maybe I'm giving people too much credit here. And yeah, this whole stuff was just not nearly what it could have been. It's not nearly as satisfying as it could have been, that it feels kind of throwaway, that Adani was kind of borderline mustache twirling villain, and that the resolution feels mean, feels cruel.
It does. Yeah.
It feels very cruel of Magic to dangle her dead brother in front of her and say, "We can bring him back." Ben can go back and save his life and make sure that car accident never happens. I appreciate the fact that Magic does not say, "You were driving that car and I can cripple your political career, you know, by sending this to the right reporter," as opposed to, you know, instead of doing that, he said, like, "No, I'm not going to blackmail you. No, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to say, give us a chance here, because, you know, we could do great things, including bring your brother back." And then for Magic to kind of like meet with Ian and Jenn and just kind of be like, you know, "No, we're not going to be able to do that. We have no way of doing that. I know that, you know that, but she doesn't know that. We've got to get Ben back home." It does feel a little cruel.
It does. And I don't want to play armchair quarterback, armchair writer, but like I would have almost preferred it if it had gone down of like, Magic presents her with the information and she comes back, she's like, are you trying to promise me like a quid pro quo that you're going to save my brother? And for Magic, you say, honestly, I can't promise you that, but with Ben leaping around in time, we can save somebody else's brother. We can save other people from these fates. Like, I can't guarantee you that we can do this for you, but we can do this for other people. This is what this project's about. Please believe in it.
Or what if, you know, to play off of the revelations from last week's episode, which aren't necessarily revelations to longtime fans of Quantum Leap. Sure. Although, you know, there were people I saw in one of the Facebook groups and somebody on Reddit that are new fans, which again, I'm loving. It's like, yes, you've never seen Quantum Leap before. You're watching the show. And they were like, my mind was blown that Magic had this, you know, and I was just sort of like, that's so awesome. Like, good for you. Like, that's cool. Well, what a wonderful way to tie that in. If Magic could have looked at her and said, like, "I know I'm here today because of what Sam Beckett did. Just imagine what Ben can do," you know? And I think stuff like that. Yeah, I think maybe that would have been a little bit more sensitive way to play it. I also felt a little odd about kind of almost the chummy goodbye between Adani and Magic. Like, it felt very at odds with the scene that we had gotten before. Because even as Magic dangled that carrot in front of her, there was definitely a look in Adani's face where she was just kind of like, I don't know what to feel or think about this right now. And then the next scene we see between them, she's all kind of like, you know,
she's almost like assured, like it's definitely gonna happen.
Like,
Now beyond that, like, my next question is, it's like, from what Magic says to Ian and Jen afterwards, it's kind of inferred that they can't do a targeted leap. And they know like that's a stretch.
Right.
So if the point of quantum leap is to not be able to do targeted leaps, what is the point?
Well, I think the point is to be able to do targeted leaps, right? Like, I think the whole point, I mean, even going back to the original series, like,
Sure.
I think Sam's initial leap was to prove that it could be done, right?
Yeah.
The idea is that then they would bring him back, and then they would be able to say, like, oh, okay, now take me to 1955.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I don't know. I think that Jen was more reinforcing the fact that, like, that's not possible. Like, in 30 years of time travel, that has never been possible. If we are to believe that, which again might be at odds with, Mirror Image, depending on how you take all the other potential time travelers in the bar with Sam. If Sam is the first time traveler ever, let's say, like, in those 30 years, like, there's never been a targeted leap. Like, we've never been able to do that, which actually isn't true, because
the leap
exactly.
back, a leap for Lisa.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they were able to do it a couple of times. So I don't know.
But anyway, on the whole, I'm glad that we were on the same page. Like, I felt Magic dangling that carrot was, like I said, it was out of character. And it's one of the, and like if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, I tend to blame the writing over blaming the character. And I can just head canon things just out the chute and be like, nope, that didn't happen, because I don't think that's in character. Lee Harvey Oswald is not a canon episode. I will take no arguments. But
the only other thing is that what I will say is again, if we're looking at motivations that go far beyond what we're necessarily given, on the screen in that moment, is that if Magic's, again, Magic is a SEAL, right? Like, and the whole reason he's there is because Sam Beckett, was there for him, right? And whether we're saying it's a retcon or whether we're saying it's, just an interpretation or whatever the case may be, like, as far as Magic is concerned, Sam Beckett saved his life. Sam Beckett is the reason why Magic is there today. And Magic has committed to no one gets left behind. No man gets left behind. If he is so obsessed, and I use that term, in a positive connotation, quite frankly, here, with getting Sam back, then why would he stop at doing, you know what I mean? He would stop at nothing to make sure that happens. And right now his goal is to get Ben back so that they can figure things out, so that they can get Sam back. Right.
Yeah.
So on one hand, yes, it seems kind of out of character. On the other hand, it's fascinating to me because just recently, I think I might've mentioned this. I was, maybe I didn't, but I've been reading one of those books, or listening rather, to one of the like behind the scenes books about Star Trek. And Harlan Ellison, when he wrote City on the Edge of Forever, one of the things that apparently a producer or somebody said to him, I don't think it was Roddenberry, but somebody said to him about, like, oh, well, so and so wouldn't do that. That's out of character for them. And Harlan Ellison was just like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, we get to decide what this character is. Like, there's no reason for it to be out of character. You just have to have a reason for why they're doing it. And I was just sort of like, yep, that's absolutely right. Like, because that's the thing. Like, we contain multitudes as human beings. There are things that I have done in my life that I'm sure other people would be like, oh, that's out of character for Sam. But in the moment, like, it was what I did. Right. And so I think that that's the thing to kind of remember, is it's like, maybe there's just more going on here that we don't know yet, and that Magic is desperate enough to do something like that, which maybe, he knows it's mean spirited. He knows that it's not the right thing to do. And the look on Jen's face in particular at the end of that scene is interesting to me, because even she's just sort of like, we're getting into dark waters here. Ian's expression is very interesting to me, because they seem a little bit more kind of like, okay, like, let's go with this, like they're almost smiling. Yeah. Ian's interesting in this episode. One of the things that I noticed in this episode that I was kind of surprised at, because it's not something that we've really seen before, is that they are on their phone at the beginning when Jen, I think, or Addison come to them, and immediately put their phone away. And I was just kind of surprised, because I'm like, why are they on their phone in the midst of Ben's leap, when they're trying to get information on what's going on in 1879.
You want me to go and add some fan wank?
Do it.
let's jump back to the scene where Ben and Addison are talking about their first date and how they came to start dating.
Yeah.
And they both mentioned about how, we were both kind of seeing other people.
Kind of, we were kind of single. Yeah.
Yeah, we were kind of single. Well, even before that, they said like the reason like they didn't get together sooner is like they were both always seeing different people and it never lined up.
Right.
What if Ben and Ian were seeing each other at one point?
I mean, I am absolutely not writing that off for a fucking second, because again, you go back and listen to what we talked about with like the premiere episode and the second episode. The way Ian has spoken about Ben, is absolutely it is fostered out of love. Like Ian, Ian has said multiple times, like, I have to get Ben back.
Yeah.
I
mean, and I don't want to send us down the road of like having any love for anyone. It automatically has to be a romantic sexual love.
Right.
I don't want to go down that road. But upon my second viewing, those lines stuck out at me. I was like, huh. And someone,
again, I'm not writing it off.
Well, somewhere out there on Twitter, I think they threw out this thing a few weeks ago saying, we talk about how progressive and bold this new Quantum Leap is with having an Asian American lead and a non-binary character, whatever. Somebody said, like, if the show really wanted to be bold, they would have had Ben and Ian engaged.
Again, I just think that there's more going on here. There's a lot of stuff going on under the surface. There's a lot of motivations for these characters. And I think that one of the things that I'm starting to, to see is that, like, the reason why I feel like the team knows where they're going, even if they don't necessarily know exactly how they're going to get there or whatever, is because I do feel as though that the actors are clearly operating at a level that says that they know more than just what's happening in that specific moment.
Sure.
Which is a testament to their acting. It's a testament to I think the showrunners and I say showrunners there because I don't think that this is just a Martin thing. I think this was probably a Steven and a Brian thing. I think this might even be a Dean thing. I think that there are multiple people here at play when it comes to infusing this story with motivations that go far beyond whatever a character is doing in that specific moment. And I love that sort of thing because we don't always get that, from TV. Like, I think a lot of people, again, expect to be kind of spoon-fed certain things, and maybe they're playing at something beyond that.
Sure.
I hope. We'll see. Maybe not.
But anyway, to answer your point, I think we've seen Ian on their phone before. I really just took that moment as Mason Alexander Park gave themselves something interesting to do before the scene began.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I'm going down that path is it's like I just feel suspicious now. Like we've seen Ian be duplicitous before, granted with Addison, at Addison's behest, right? We've seen Ian rope other people into that duplicity, unbeknownst to whoever they're working with. But so I'm curious about that. I don't think Ian is bad, is evil, is going to turn on the project or anything like that. I think that they are absolutely committed to this mission. I think that they are, I think that the other thing is, as much as we talk about Ian's love, and again, could be a platonic love, that their love for Ben, as real and genuine and important that is, it's clear that their love for Addison is also that as well.
Absolutely.
And so I think that I'm not trying to set them up as being a bad guy in any sort of way. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. It was something I wanted to take note of because we don't necessarily know yet.
Sure. Yeah. Before we move on back to maybe 1879. Did you notice the tattoo on Ian/Mason's chest?
Yeah, the gender with the line through it.
With the line through it.
Yeah, I love that.
Thought that was interesting.
Yeah, they've got some great tattoos.
I know, like somebody else on Twitter said that they can't wait to get screen captures so they can analyze like all the different tattoos that Ian and Mason have on their arms. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to 1879. 1879. Ben is convinced at this point that he's going to have to learn how to shoot, right? So he's trying to learn how to shoot. And through the course of this, we meet. You're gonna have to remind me of his name. I cannot.
Henry.
It's Marquise Wilson. Henry. Yeah. He was on the Blind Spot actually.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So he's awesome. I thought he was fantastic. was I reading too much into it, or is he totally absolutely gay? Like that was the reason why he had to come to salvation, so he could find a place where he could be himself.
I mean, I was reading the fact that he was black in
Sure.
in 1879, but yes, I think that's a totally valid read.
I think that I of course, absolutely, yes. I thought that part too, but the more I thought about it, the more I was just sort of like, oh, what a really wonderful way to kind of like, I felt like that was the subtext that was working there, and I really enjoyed that.
But
and I think again that's the thing about this city and why salvation is so important to these people, is it's like this was the place that they could go to be who they are, you know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my reading is more surface level, but what I love, Ben's whole opposition to guns, the shooting, the anger, and he shoots himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I can appreciate that. And then I hate guns.
Yeah. And then that leads us to one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode, which is when he's getting patched up by the doctor, who's played by Eddie Park. And that scene is just so lovely. I really enjoyed the interplay between Raymond and Eddie, even more than that when the grandfather came in and served him the dim sum, and how Ben was like speaking Cantonese, and it was just such a lovely scene. And I think that, to me, again, it was one of those scenes that gets to the core of what we love about Quantum Leap, and about how, you know, for Ben, his investment in these people that he's with, and how important it is to make sure that, you know, that they're safe, and that they deserve that, right? You know, that this isn't surface level for him, that it's important beyond that, which I really appreciated. Then of course, go ahead.
The forge gets set on fire.
Yep.
At this point, and really this drives to the scene of Valentina just totally losing faith in her grandfather.
Yeah, and she's going to take those guns, and she's going to go, and she's going to get McDonough herself.
We haven't talked about it yet. There are little shades, there are little intentional or not nods to The Last Gunfighter.
Yep.
In this, and this is like taking the guns, going here in a little bit. We're going to see Ben getting drunk. The only time we ever saw Sam drunk or hungover in the original series was The Last Gunfighter.
Yep.
Yeah. But I don't know how much more to say about the scene about Valentino and Ben, other than just like the actor Natalia Del Riego. It's just, I'm not familiar with her work at all, but just absolutely wonderful.
I thought she did great. I mean, even from the very first scene, I think we even talked about it briefly last week at the end of the episode, where it was just sort of like, wow, I don't know who this person is yet, but I'm sold, like I'm in. You know, one thing that we should remark on too is that there is talk about the fact that Ben is in an older body. You know, we mentioned this last week, and that is something that that is actually I should address this real quick. Like, that was my wife that just popped up behind me. I don't know why the
if you're getting the audio version, sorry.
Like, if you're watching this on YouTube and you just happen to see a figure, that was her. Now you can't see her anymore, but you know. Anyway, no, it's like I have my own hologram now. It's like she's my Addison.
You do, yeah.
So anyway,
high compliment.
Right. I think that she does a wonderful job. That Ben, the older body. That it's nice that we do get that talked a little bit about. I don't know how much it comes into play necessarily, though.
So that's the thing. I wanted more, especially after they made such a big deal about the reason why Ben was able to do what he was able to do in episode 3 is because he was in a stronger body with faster reflexes that was trained to box. Right. I wish we would have seen, you know, something, not even like overblow it, but like some like smaller acknowledgement, like, oh yeah, he is in an older body, it is a little bit more difficult to move. You know, like if his hands were shaky when he was shooting, not just because he doesn't do well holding a gun himself, but also because he's in an older body of a drinker.
Right.
And handshaking, you know, is part of it, which I think they even address in The Last Gunfighter. I wish they would have addressed it a little bit more. And more broadly to the point, I want the writers and the producers to start showing us the Leapy more and taking more chances and trusting the audience to get it. Because jumping back to the first scene, I think it would have been really lovely when Valentina jumped up and said, here's the hope of the town. If we saw everybody else's perspective and the hope of the town was like this washed up old gunfighter.
Yeah.
And we actually saw the old man standing there.
Although Ben's reaction is pretty priceless.
I know.
No.
I love that when that he could see it coming, like, no.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, that's definitely something that we talked about before. I do think that one thing that's maybe a little bit more apparent in this episode, although you definitely saw it in the last episode too, because I know that this is like something that I've seen a little bit of chatter about online, about like, why does no one notice that he's talking to Addison? And it's like, well, they do. It's just not as overt as it might have been in the original series at times, because there's a moment when like they're walking down the street in broad daylight and Ben is just talking up a storm to Addison. All the background actors are absolutely noticing because they're looking at him like, what in the world? Like it's there. You just you have to look for it. And I think again, that's the thing, is it's like sometimes audiences, maybe they're not engaged at that level. They're not looking for it. I don't know.
And also, and I don't want to like get hung up on this, like, but for me, I felt like that joke was played out a lot in the original series.
Yes. Right.
And for me, like maybe for newer fans, maybe they need to see that. But for me, like I don't need to see the cutaway shots of people looking at the Leapy weird.
Right.
Unless it like informs the plot.
Yes,
totally. In a very specific way. Otherwise, it's like I've seen the joke, I've seen the weird cuts away to other people to acknowledge it. As an older fan, I get it. Like I said, all I need to see is like one person in the background going,
exactly.
out of focus, and that's all I need to see. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. Ben getting direct. It's interesting too, because I love the fact that like, Ben is kind of like not sure what to do. And again, I one of the things I appreciate about the character is kind of his agency. The other thing that I appreciate is the relationship between Ben and Addison. And this is a moment where Addison really comes in, comes through for him big time, because she gives him the idea and says like, so-and-so can do this, so-and-so can do this, and so-and-so can do this. You've got this, and this, build a better mousetrap. And that's like all Ben needs to kind of set him off. And then Ben has, such a beautiful callback, and it's such a brilliant moment. What does Ben do? He brings everybody together, and it's perfect. It's a perfect callback to Atlantis. It's like that's who Ben is, right? Like Ben brings people together, and he does it in this moment where he has this wonderful speech to the townsfolk, and what do? They build a better mousetrap, and it's great. It's a wonderful scene, and we get a little montage of all the stuff that's happening, and
the salvation montage. I put yeah. Now we are conflating two scenes here. So there is a scene where they're at the bar and he's getting drunk,
right?
And I love like him talking about like, this is, this tastes like gasoline. It probably is gasoline. He's not drinking Malort. Chicago joke. Anyway, and I love like just like the very defeatist, like, not my body, as he takes another drink. I thought that was really, really interesting. And I wanted to jump back. At the end of this scene, he gets up and walks out, and sitting at a table very nearby is Walter.
Yeah.
I feel like Walter is like, he's the only other person in the bar, or like very close, but there's like a very intentional shot. Like he is sitting right by the table, and he gives Ben a look as Ben is walking out.
It makes me wonder too if, and this will be fun for mirror image shots maybe down the road. It makes me wonder if Walter doesn't see Ben, Walter sees Diego, and that when Walter grabs Ben, Ben sees whoever Walter is leapt into. He doesn't see, Walter. It's also interesting to think about, we talked a little bit about, when is Walter from? I love that we're just calling him Walter. But
damn it, Walter.
It also makes me wonder, where in Walter's timeline is this? You know what I mean? Like that they're not in sync, right? So is Ben going to meet Walter out of sequence? You know what I mean? Like, are we going to see a leap down the road where Walter doesn't know who Ben Song is?
Yeah.
Like I think that there's just so much interesting stuff to play with here. And it'll be very interesting to see where they go with that. But back to kind of the task at hand. Like I do love the fact that they use their wits and they use what they're good at. They use what each individual is good at in order to capture the gang. I love that they capture them, that they get the reward money. I also love the kind of the twist that well, there's a reason why Ben hasn't left yet, because the reward money, it's not enough. It's going to run out. And that's when Addison drops the bomb, like, there's a copper vein not far from here, and then Ben is just sort of like throwing that information out. He's making it rain with info here. He's like,
sure.
he's like,
Yeah.
guess what, guys? It's a copper vein. You better get to it before the telephone companies do, that talking box, it's going to be
go somewhere. Oh yeah. But I wanted to get to the earlier scene with Walter, because I think that earlier scene is where Walter figures it out.
The first scene?
No. The
bar
scene that the bar scene, because he's just seen Diego sitting at a table talking to himself. Now I'm just assuming that Walter has a hologram and that it's something similar. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't. Wouldn't that be interesting?
That true.
What if he's progressed to that that Sam point, right, where he's in control?
I don't know.
I don't think he is, but I mean, I just again, there's it's rich. It's rich with possibilities.
And the thing is, this is something we were Matt pointed out when we were discussing online. If you look at the credits, Walter is top billed in this episode out of the guest stars.
He is, yep.
He is very likely the one that's going to come back. And given the nature of like they're building the story, I don't think, and I haven't gone back and watched the earlier episodes, like I don't think Walter pops up in the background anywhere in previous episodes, but he specifically says, "Why are you following me?" I think it would be really interesting if in a later episode we do actually flash back to earlier episodes and they throw in a shot of you see
Walter at the boxing matches, or
Walter at the boxing match, or Walter somewhere in 1985. It'd be very hard to do in Atlantis.
Oh man, unless they they pull the magic trick where, no pun intended, where we speculated at first, like, are we seeing the actual leaper or are we seeing who they've leapt into in the episode? If in Atlantis, for instance, what if what if we didn't see him but we find out that he was on Space Station Mir, that they were in proximity to one another, right? That Walter was inside the space station, we just never actually saw him. That would be a great trick. Or what if Walter was one of the people on Atlantis, we just didn't see them as Walter?
Yeah, I was thinking of not Stratton, not the commander. I can't think of the third one's name.
Yeah, I can't either.
He would be the one who's like,
it's been
anyway. Yeah, but yeah, there's some speculation there. But yeah, everything you said. So they build a better mousetrap. They trap Diego and his gang. And we skipped over, Valentina getting kidnapped and held. But like those are the stakes. Like that's the duel.
Right.
That's why they're going to do it. And then we get to the last scene in Dr. Ben's song of the year 2022.
Yeah.
How is it every time they say 2022 in the show, they manage to sound like it's the future?
I know, right? You're right. I do love though that we get the reaffirmation that that it is 2022, that the present day is literally the present day, because I do think that there's still some there are pockets out there where I do see people thinking like it's 2025 or thinking that it's a different year or whatever. It's like, no, it's definitely 2022. Two other things that we didn't mention, and I think that this is a perfect opportunity to do it, because right before we get the reveal of the other leaper, we're getting a wonderful Ben and Addison moment, and Ben says this thing about, like, is it possible to kiss a hologram? One of the other, I love the hand holding moment that we get earlier on.
We get throughout, like hand holding. We totally skipped over when like she's helping him aim the gun. Her arm comes up, and I love that their arms, the way it's shot, their arms are out of focus because they're so far in the foreground of the shot that the hologram effect is also out of focus.
Yeah,
that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's just a lot of really, really wonderful stuff, and that's why I think that the episode, even though it definitely has some flaws, it's a really good episode, and there's a lot of really wonderful stuff in it. And I hope people enjoy it. And I really look forward to what the conversations are going to be like coming out of it. I think that there are a few people that, have been speculating about, another leaper for a while. There are some people that have some, some other bits and baubles of information that are out there that have, kind of sort of previously confirmed this. One thing that we say is that we have seen, and this is not anything that that we've been given or whatever. We've just happened to see that the other leaper was referred to as a Marine at some point, which will be interesting to see if that is the case, if they are actually a Marine, and what that means for their background, and how that might relate to to Addison's military background, if at all, or Magic's for that matter, or Al's, or anyone's.
But
don't know if that's actually going to be the case. But
it makes sense. Like if they're being sent by the government or some government entity, you send a soldier.
Right.
That totally makes sense.
And Addison, I mean,
sure.
Addison's the first woman ever selected to travel through time. She, is a captain in the military. That's the other thing too, because the congresswoman refers to her as a captain, like it gives you the idea. It's like, oh, she's still like, we've been going along this assumption that she's ex-military, but I think that like, it's like, no, like she's still active. Military. Maybe not active, but hologram. So I don't know. Yeah, it'll be really, really interesting to see.
But I just like I said, just like you've made a serious miscalculation coming after me, and I love it's like, I know what you're trying to do, but if you value your life, stop.
Right.
Like it's not a threat, and it's almost there's like an acknowledgement of like, I know what you're trying to do, and it's not in opposition to me. I know what you're trying to do, but stop.
Right, which is the other thing that I think is fascinating. It goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. And it's like, he knows more than Ben knows at this point, because Ben doesn't know what he's trying to do. That's the other thing, I think, where Ben is so confused, where it's just sort of like, and you had mentioned, it's funny, you haven't actually mentioned this yet, I don't think, but Addison's eyes in the scene.
Yeah. I think, I mean, she's not even not in focus, but like her eyes, like going like that wide, like just totally stills the scene for me. Just like,
yeah. I can't wait. I don't think we're going to get much follow up next week. We could, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing so here's
have in the project story, they have to address it some way.
I'm sure they will. Yes. I think that that's the thing. It's probably been easier for them to reshoot project stuff than it was for them to reshoot earthquake stuff.
Yeah. But I do know they were doing some reshoots, because I texted you a thing the other night. But I was looking on Instagram, and I was just looking under the Quantum Leap hashtag, and some actor recently said that she was in Vancouver, and it was implied that she was shooting for Quantum Leap. So I'm wondering if they were doing like some very minor.
But the weird thing about that is that the cabs in the photo were New York cabs, not San Francisco cabs.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll find out. But I mean, obviously, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that we've heard about the earthquake episode is that there's some really creative stuff going on throughout the course of the episode. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. It's like I said, we're off to the races. I mean, there's so much good stuff going on, and I hope we get a little bit more Ian next week, because we didn't get a lot of Ian this week.
I felt a little shorted on Ian this week.
I was a little hungry for some more Mason. I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this information affects Ben. I went so far as to speculate in a conversation that we were having with someone on Twitter that what if in some way this like overloads Ben, like he can't kind of deal with all this information, and it kind of sets him back memory wise a little bit. I think that's a terrible idea. Even as I was typing it, I was like, this is bad. I don't know why I'm typing it.
Well, I don't think so, because somebody asked that question on Twitter, and Dean Georgeris replied directly, and he said that the first leap wiped out Ben's memory, but then he accumulates and keeps his memories from leap to leap.
Right.
So to me, that kind of hurts. I think
it makes sense, because people have said that that's at odds with the original series, and it's not, because the thing that you have to remember is Sam accumulates knowledge too. It's just that when he gets to Donna, he leaps again. So naturally his brain's going to be Swiss cheesed again. Yeah. So I think that it's not, it's not at all at
He
odds.
forgets the major things. Convenient for plot. He forgets Donna. He forgets Sammy Joe.
Right.
He forgets the Simo Leap in general.
I don't know. See, here's the other thing that I've always argued and wondered is like, does he forget them? Or is the Sam that is traveling through time just completely unaware of their existence? Because for him, they weren't a part of his life, right? And Sammy Joe in particular would not have been a part of his life until, most likely after he left, because I that's always been my assumption. She showed up at the project after he left. She wasn't working on the project alongside her dad,
Yeah. Well, I'm going by the line at the end of Trilogy, the 3rd episode, where Al specifically says, Sammy Joe is working at the project. She doesn't know that you're her father. And Ziggy says, after the sleep, you won't know either. All convenient for the plot. But anyway, I think
that's the other thing too, is it's like anybody relying on the original series for the rules is going to be, pretty sad, because let's face it, the rules changed from week to week. It's like, think about the fact that like Al saw Sam as Samantha Stormer in What Price Gloria, and then Al was seeing Sam after that, and they had to so it's like the rules were inconsistent in the original series. So that's the other thing, it's like trying to be beholden to the original series for any sort of like guidance or whatever, I feel like is kind of like take what's useful, leave the rest. Let's just dive in and anyway, off to the races. No listener mail this week. If you would like to send us a piece of mail that specifically you would like us to read and respond to, send us an email at fateswidewheelpodcast@gmail.com. Again, hit the this is salty about the fact that Fate's Wide Wheel at Gmail is taken.
I'm just making sure that people know. Become a patron or a donor if you would like. And again, if you donate at any level, either monthly or one time, you get invited to our watch parties on Monday nights during the episode. We start about 8:30. We kibitz a little bit over the voice because we're watching it live, and then we chat for a little bit afterwards. But we have a good time talking afterwards. Don't worry, we do not talk during the episode. We chat a little bit. We chat in the Zoom chat, but we do not actually talk during the episode. But then afterwards, the gloves come off and we talk about the episode. I am so interested to see what people think. I'm interested to see a more expanded trailer of the San Francisco leap.
Me too.
Of the earthquake leap. And I've heard the talk in LA right now, and the talk in the industry is just that Martin Garrow has done a fantastic creative job with repurposing this episode. And I'm very interested to see it. I'm interested to see what version of the hand link we're going to get.
Me too. And if there's an explanation for it.
And I'm just interested in the story itself. Today I was on TikTok and somebody shared, it was like a full 3 minutes. It was, if you were watching the World Series on TV,
I was,
what you saw when the earthquake hit.
Yeah, I was 8 years old. I remember.
And I just, found that incredibly fascinating. That particular video wasn't shared, but if I can find it somewhere else, I'll put it on our Quantum Leap TikTok account, because it was just, I have only vague memories of it, but it was just so, fascinating to watch.
I was big into baseball. In fact, I was playing baseball at that age, and so like baseball was kind of all consuming for me from the time I was maybe about like 5 until about 10, and then I was just like,
that was that.
I'm gonna go do other things. I tried out for baseball when I was in like junior high and high school, but
I did the same.
I was by that point I was sold on the theater. So
it happens. Anyway. So that's our episode. Shoot us an email, become a donor. If you listen to us on Apple Podcast, if you're so kind, leave us a review. On Apple Podcasts. We would really appreciate it. And excuse me, talk to us, engage with us on Twitter and all of the socials, and let us. I love the conversation that we're having. Like somebody started a thing yesterday, like asking where everybody was from, and that started a nice thread of everybody coming in. There are like 3 people like right in my vicinity.
That's awesome,
because we were like talking back and forth on there. And also I love somebody threw out the question of like, how do you listen to the podcast? like which one do you which one do you first? And I think Mike
Oh.
offered her like he threw out like for some reason like he always listens to Quantum Leap podcast first and then he watches us on YouTube. I am so sorry for your eyes. I'm sorry that you're watching us on YouTube. But we appreciate it. Yeah, however you're doing it. We appreciate you joining us and coming along for the ride.
Absolutely. I just want to reiterate that immense feeling of gratitude. I'm very grateful. It's been so much fun. I mean, the truth of the matter is that like we've been doing this for over 5 years now, and that it has become apparent to me now with the new series in a way that I feel like, your engagement, your listenership allows us to do this in the way that we're doing it right now. And beforehand, I just kind of felt like we were just two dudes talking into a microphone, and if people listen, they listen. Who cares?
Sure.
And and there's a part of me that still kind of feels that way, right? Like I approach it in a fashion of just sort of like, we're going to do this, and if people listen, great. But it's just become increasingly clear as the new series has dawned on us that that we're just so grateful for the fact that you allow us to do this and help us to do this. And I love seeing all the conversations, even the ones that we don't even take part in. It's like when I get to scroll through the feed, especially on Twitter, and just see those conversations that are happening amongst people that we follow or that follow us. It's really, really cool. And so I thank you all. I'm grateful for you all. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, stay safe out there, and remember to leap responsibly.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.